Hello everybody, Saeed here again from Insanely Sane Media. I'm just going to follow up on the Godzilla King of the Monsters Trailer 2 breakdown that I did before. This video is going to be a story prediction. After watching both of the trailers, I think I can kind of piece together a significant part of the plot. So for those of you watching this video, I would just warn you that there might be some spoilers in this video, or maybe I could my prediction could be completely wrong, and maybe I won't spoil anything at all. So watch this at your own risk, but yeah, I am telling you that there might be some spoilers if my predictions turn out to be correct. So without further ado, let's get started. Judging by the trailers, I think that the overall premise of the story will revolve around humans trying to prevent our world from being seized by its original inhabitants. And humanity will have to find a way to live harmoniously with these ancient monstrosities. And the only way they can do that is by aiding the most neutral of these gigantic beasts, Godzilla. I think the protagonists will be kind of aiming to aid Godzilla in succeeding and taking over the world completely for himself, while I think the antagonists will be aiming for King Ghidorah to take the world over all for himself. So this video will basically just explore that kind of conflict. So just to let you know that I think just like the first movie, the plot will have two storylines. One storyline will revolve around the humans, and the second storyline will revolve around the monsters. I'm going to go through the human storyline first and explain who the protagonist and antagonist will be, and then of course I'm going to go into the monster storyline and kind of detail that. So I'm going to leave the little icons on top just so you can distinguish when I'm talking about humans and when I'm talking about the monster storyline. Okay, so first of all, the first storyline will be revolving around the humans. And I think the protagonist of the humans, Millie Bobby Brown's character, who is the daughter of Vera Farmiga's character, who is an employee of Monarch. And I think Millie Bobby Brown's character, in the end, her objective will be to kind of persuade her mother and the eco-terrorist group not to unleash King Ghidorah. While on the other hand, I think the antagonist of the human story is going to be Charles Dance's character, who is the head of the eco-terrorist group. And his objective will be to unleash King Ghidorah because of a very peculiar reason. And his reason is that he found out that King Ghidorah is actually of an alien species. He has reason to believe that we should anticipate an alien invasion from humanoids, just like the original Godzilla vs. Monster Zero story. An invasion from alien humans, and King Ghidorah is basically their monster. So this is why he wants to unleash King Ghidorah. He's kind of doing it for an altruistic reason. He thinks that if Godzilla succeeds, and Godzilla is the king of the monsters and he's the only monster alive out of all of this, it's not going to be long until the alien race comes down to Earth and realize that their monster, King Ghidorah, has been killed, and it will make them furious, and they have the technology to instantly kill Godzilla and enslave humanity for good. He's trying to basically be on King Ghidorah's side so that when King Ghidorah succeeds, he feels that humanity and this alien race can build peace between each other. And I think Vera Farmiga's character should be abducted somehow and brought to Charles Dance's character, and he will be able to kind of turn her mind around. She will probably be against the idea, and Charles Dance will probably persuade her to come on his side. And of course, the plot will kind of funnel down to Millie Bobby Brown trying to kind of persuade her mother and Charles Dance's character not to release King Ghidorah. But of course, maybe that doesn't exactly go down her way. And that's why she's smiling in the trailer. I think Millie Bobby Brown is smiling when she sees Godzilla because her mother and Charles Dance's character release King Ghidorah. And so when she finally sees Godzilla come to shore and just rush toward King Ghidorah to fight him, she sees hope in Godzilla. So I think that's kind of what the conflict's going to be between Millie Bobby Brown being the protagonist and Charles Dance being the antagonist. Just to kind of get through some subplots, I do believe her father's going to play a role in this. So her father is going to be approached by Dr. Kurosawa, played by Ken Watanabe. He brings her father along because he wants to know what Millie Bobby Brown's father knows about Vera Farmiga's character, because of course Vera Farmiga's character works for Monarch, and supposedly she has a machine, or she has some kind of a device in which she can actually communicate with the monsters, make them change direction and that kind of stuff. So you keep on seeing this aeroplane throughout the trailers, and you see Rodan following this aeroplane. So you also see at the end battle between Godzilla and King Ghidorah, I think the device is on board that plane and possibly kind of giving out signals for the monsters to follow it to where it needs to go. Basically, Kurosawa's character abducts Vera Farmiga's husband to kind of find out what he knows about this piece of technology that his wife has discovered. Throughout the trailer, we see him kind of just loathing his wife and then kind of in great desperation, great pain, and I think that kind of comes from the story point near the end when she's kind of given into Charles Dance's character. You know, these characters are always kind of going back and forth in her head, Charles Dance versus her husband, and in the end she chooses Charles Dance's position on releasing King Ghidorah. We have to ask a very important question here, which is, where is Millie Bobby Brown in the trailer? And how come she's alone? You know, we keep on seeing her in Boston. She's in this kind of underground bunker type of place with radio frequencies and radio communications. She doesn't get any response other than the monsters fighting outside. She's just basically trapped in this town. She's all alone. So we have to ask, why is she all alone? You know, why is Boston desolate? And why is she the only person there? And how did she get there? Well, I think there is a reasonable explanation for this. I think in the first act, it's going to reveal that this is happening primarily when the first monster breaks out. So I'm going to get into this more thoroughly in the next stage when I talk about the monsters. But I think the first act will end with the first monster breaking out, everybody evacuating from the city, and Millie Bobby Brown, instead of evacuating, she kind of listens to her mother and hides in this underground bunker, or hides in this very secluded place. But of course, when she reaches the surface, she realizes that everybody's gone and the city's desolate. So I think in the first act, what's going to happen is Vera Farmiga, because she works for Monarch, she's going to have this kind of mother-daughter moment where she kind of tells Millie Bobby Brown that, look, she's going to protect her, nothing's going to happen, they have this all under control, they just have to prevent any of the monsters from breaking out. They just have to leave Godzilla alone and not give him any excuse to return to the surface. She kind of tells Millie Bobby Brown that, look, this is the bunker that we work in, this is a secret communication place, and of course if there is a disaster, there'll be some kind of exposition where she tells Millie Bobby Brown that if there's a disaster, of course, the best thing to do is in the city, in Boston, is to run to this kind of this place basically. And that's what we're seeing in the trailer, I believe. That's the kind of human story in a nutshell. Protagonist will be Millie Bobby Brown as she kind of walks through this desolate town, possibly full of little monsters and other threats in the Godzilla universe, as she tries to survive. And her mother and father are kind of, her father especially is trying to persuade Kurosawa, other people in the UN, to kind of help him retrieve his daughter from Boston, potentially after they get her message through the radio. So I think that's kind of what a majority of the human plot will be, this debate between should we release King Ghidorah or not, and what will be the consequences if we do, what will be the consequences of not releasing King Ghidorah and letting Godzilla win. And in the end, of course, I think this will all funnel down to this battle at the end. The monster story, of course, the second plotline will be revolving around the monsters. I personally think the protagonist of the monsters here is primarily going to be Mothra, I think, and I'll explain why. Basically, I think the first monster that breaks out is not a kaiju, it's nothing in the traditional Godzilla films, but if you watch this scene here where there are oil rigs and that kind of stuff, and there are these claws coming out, I think this is an original giant monster that's created by Legendary Pictures, and I think this is the first thing to break out of the surface, and this kind of makes its way toward Boston and that kind of stuff. So there's this kind of emergency all across the city, and everybody evacuates, but of course Millie Bobby Brown, listening to her mother from Act 1, runs to this bunker. Millie Bobby Brown then realizes after the attack that maybe this may have not been the best course of action, and I think that's what kind of explains the monster roars that she hears on the radio, because she can actually hear outside what's going on, and she hears this roar from a monster, but it's not like any of the kaijus we know. At the same time, she hears Godzilla's roar, and this is when I think what's going to happen is basically once this monster breaks out and makes its way across the US toward Boston and possibly beyond Boston, I think Millie Bobby Brown's father, who at this time in the story is with Dr. Kurosawa, he basically witnesses Kurosawa calling Godzilla, who is swimming around at the bottom of the ocean, just feeding off radiation, and going to his temple just for a bit of rest every now and then. I believe that they're going to call Godzilla to the surface to fight this thing. So when Godzilla rises and he fights this thing off, he eventually fights this thing and he kills this thing. And I think that's what Millie Bobby Brown is listening to, a fight between this new Legendary Pictures kaiju that they created and Godzilla. Then I think what's going to happen is basically Rodan is going to break free from the volcano. Rodan is going to be a force to be reckoned with. He's been described as an A-bomb with wings, basically like a nuclear bomb blast, but with wings. Everything he flies over, he creates that kind of nuclear bomb blast effect all across the cities and the towns he flies over. I think what's going to happen is when Rodan breaks out, Godzilla's going to have a fight with him, but Rodan is just going to destroy Godzilla. It is going to lead Godzilla to kind of fall back in the sea, and Godzilla's going to swim back to his temple And this is the shot that we see in the trailer where they see Godzilla lying around, he's all weak and Godzilla's basically dying. And I think this is when Mothra comes into the scene, because they find this cocoon and this cocoon cracks. You know, there are monsters coming out from everywhere. This cocoon cracks, Mothra comes out, Billy Bobby Brown kind of bonds with Mothra. And I think, you know, a lot of people think that Billy Bobby Brown has this telepathic power with monsters. It could be, but I think it's actually the other way around. I think Mothra in this particular monsterverse has the ability to empathize with humans. So that's why Mothra is not attacking the humans, because she can empathize their fear, she can empathize their concerns. In Mothra's eyes, Millie Bobby Brown is just pure innocence, and she knows that this child is frightened, and she knows that this child is desperate for a savior. And of course Mothra knows that the savior is Godzilla. I believe that Mothra comes out of the cocoon in her winged form. Mothra has the ability to soak up the destruction caused by Rodan. He creates this kind of atom bomb effect. Similarly, how King Ghidorah, he creates a storm whenever he comes to the surface. However, I think that Mothra has the ability to clear these storms up. She needs an alliance. She needs to partner up with Godzilla. So I think what happens is, after Mothra breaks out, she possibly tests her powers with Rodan. So there are probably storms everywhere, and Mothra flies over these scenes and soaks up the storm, and this kind of establishes the fact that yes, she can soak up storms. Next, I think she goes to Godzilla in the temple and kind of heals him somehow, and so Godzilla gets his strength back. And I think this is when this shot comes into place, when there's something coming out of the ground, is basically Godzilla breaking through his temple and coming out of the ground, just like how he did in the original story when he faced off against King Ghidorah, Mothra and Rodan. Basically, this is actually Godzilla breaking out from the temple through the surface, looking stronger than ever. And he, along with Mothra, because they're teaming up now, they go to Rodan and they kick his ass, and so that's Rodan finished. After that's done, Godzilla starts fighting with Mothra. Godzilla has a conflict with Mothra because there can only be one king. However, Mothra doesn't want to engage back with Godzilla. She flies off, and of course Godzilla just goes his own way. Probably a couple of other two kaijus break out across the world, so she goes, look, you have to choose, either let Godzilla live in this world, because I think Godzilla will be more than happy just living below the surface in the seas, swimming around, while there are other ground kaijus, because I think that's where the main threat is going to come from ground kaijus. While there are ground kaijus roaming around destroying everything, I think this is when Vera Farmiga says, look, there can only be one king, and it's best to make that Monster Zero, King Ghidorah, because this will prevent a greater threat that's coming in the future. This is when her husband kind of lashes out, says, are you out of your mind? But she says there's no choice, and that's when she lets out King Ghidorah. King Ghidorah surfaces, kills all these other ground kaijus that are out. She kills them effortlessly, and she possibly kills Mothra effortlessly. This kind of strikes a chord in Godzilla's heart. He kind of remembers, because, you know, Godzilla doesn't really want to fight. He doesn't really care anymore. He just wants to live in the water. He doesn't really care what happens on the surface, but the death of Mothra kind of strikes a chord in him, and so that's when he comes up to the ground level, and that's when he gives that angry look, possibly toward looking at the death of Mothra, and he looks into the distance where King Ghidorah flew off, and he heads down that direction, and during the night, this is when they fight. I think that's what the monster story is going to be. It's going to be a story of trying to get Godzilla to fight King Ghidorah versus trying to help King Ghidorah break out and win and take over to prevent an alien invasion from the master race that rules over King Ghidorah, or possibly works with King Ghidorah. Now, just a few notes here. I do think that this is possibly the plot that they're going to go with, because it also sets up the conflict for King Kong versus Godzilla. Because what's going to happen is once Godzilla kills King Ghidorah and he takes over the world, radiation is possibly going to run out around his part. The only form of radiation they will have is possibly on Skull Island. We don't know how many tests have been conducted since Kong Skull Island up until today, so there must be more missiles and radiation and that kind of stuff around that area. So he goes there, and that's when he meets King Kong. And of course, in Godzilla vs King Kong, they're gonna fight. And I think in the end, and this might be very unpopular with the fans, but I think in the end what's gonna happen in that movie is that the aliens actually finally do arrive on Earth. King Kong and Godzilla are gonna have to kind of team up, or kind of become frenemies, and kind of fight off this monster race. And I think this race is either gonna kill both of them, or kind of put them in some kind of a coma where we're not going to see them until the license are renewed from Toho to Legendary, you could say. So yeah, I think that's kind of the plot for the story. I know this video must have been quite long, possibly not exactly how I described it, but somewhere along the lines of that. But again, I could be wrong, and I just want to thank you for listening to me as I kind of went through that. Thank you.